So, hello everyone. My name is Mustafa. We probably met somewhere else, and thank you for joining us today. And this is called this series of activities we called AI Research and Networking Series. The purpose of this research network series is to connect scholars, researcher, people across campus and beyond to enable cross-pollinate ideas and share and open collaboration opportunities. Indeed, due to this, we just connected last semester, a year and a half. Indeed, many different researchers highlighted their AI related research and talk, and that give us a really nice idea how we can just work with other people on campus. And I want to highlight one thing. Thanks to this talk, my recent paper with Sudong just get published. We just has a kind of idea exchange, and we worked together last semester, and we just get the paper published. And the other purpose of these AI Research Network series enable people to connect and seek for institutional grant. Indeed, Shanetta and other people just work towards a couple of different grants with us and by themselves. And they are seeking for some of the AI grant, and we are working with a couple of other groups as well. And Shanada and I was connected during these sessions, and it was really nice connection. And I really admire her work and others in our talk today. So we are excited to welcome Dr. Shanada, Assistant Professor of Strategic Communication at Elon University. Her research focuses on strategic communication with an emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusions, digital activism, and how organizations engage with diverse audience. She also explores how these areas intersect with teaching and emerging technologies. In today's sessions, Dr. Shanada will share a case study on integrating a custom AI chatbot into strategic research method course, positioning AI as a pedagogical partner rather than a shortcut. She will explore how the chatbots support both qualitative and quantitative work while maintaining academic rigor, reflect on its impact on students' learning, faculty workload. This is something that we need to talk, am I right? And responsible AI use in the classroom. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Shanetta Pendleton.
Thank you so much, Mustafa, and thank you so much to everybody who is here. I know it's a busy season for us all. Before we started, we were talking about advising, and so I'm going to try to make this as interesting as possible. So, as Mustafa stated, the goal of this presentation is just to share my experience integrating a custom chatbot into my class and thinking about how we could possibly use it or not use it in the future if it's something that you're interested in. So, for a little bit of background and context on the course and how I used it. So, this course is actually Strategic Research Methods. It is a 3,000 level course designed for StratCom majors. So it is a part of the major requirements. Typically we have students who take it during their junior year, but it currently doesn't have any prerequisites listed. So every now and then we get outliers. So students taking it a little earlier or even a little later than we would want them to. So this is something that we actually have to combat because we have to understand that students are entering into the course at different levels. So the course learning objectives really emphasize the development of applied research competencies in communication. So they're engaging in research and analysis, so primary and secondary research, and really working on those things from start to finish. And for a lot of our students, it's their first time conducting research. So we have to be thinking about that as we go through explaining the case of how it played out. This is also a course that is designated as data intensive at Elon University. So that is something to keep in mind as well. And also the learning objectives associated with that. So here are my problems. Okay, so the project really started from a real issue. I had no intention of integrating AI in my classes at all. However, in the spring of 2024, students were really already using AI and not using it well. Okay, so I would get assignments, and even though I did have a blanket AI use policy in the class and noted in the syllabus, they still weren't disclosing it. And we all know that AI detection is so unreliable and hasn't caught up yet. So It was something that I knew I had to address head on. And honestly, I was more concerned about the fact that they didn't even realize how insufficient the output was based on the assignment requirements and what I was actually hoping that the students would learn from it. So at the same time, we know that any research methods course can be very demanding. So there was a high cognitive load for students. Again, most of them, it was their first time conducting research. So they really considered this class as a difficult one for them. And I included this excerpt from my syllabus to kind of highlight some of the things that we're working on with students. So this course marks a transition in their academic career from learning as a collection of facts to learning as a mastery of thinking. So I was really trying to shift their thinking and their learning from tell me what I should know to tell me what, to also including this is what I think I need to know. So I always say that a part of my teaching philosophy is getting students excited about taking an active interest in their learning and being engaged in their learning and excited about taking the lead. The knowledge doesn't just stop with me. I want them to continue it beyond me, and in this case, beyond technology and a chatbot. So another issue that I was dealing with is spending a lot of time on answering repetitive questions. So we all know how it feels to ask, to explain to a student, well, what does the syllabus say? Did you check the syllabus? Did you check Moodle? And so that was taking up a lot of time. A lot of this was not just due to students not reading the syllabus, but also due to their own anxiety surrounding taking the course and not wanting to mess up and like fear-driven failure, so to speak, or just being frozen because they're afraid. This goes on along with students being so focused on grades over their learning. So students were extremely grade motivated. And before this class, of course, they'd always been in courses that had focused on there being one right answer. And that's just not the case in research. So this whole idea of what can I do to get an A, it's not necessarily a way to lead the process in terms of learning in this course. So that was also a problem that I ran into as well. Additionally, we were dealing with industry shifts as well. So technology has always had a significant impact on communications fields. So during the last session, Matt talked about the printing press, for instance. So it was imperative for us as educators in comm to prepare our students for the jobs that exist today and the jobs that will exist 5 to 10 years from now. So industry research had already confirmed that AI is embedded in the workflow of communication professionals. So I used this excerpt from a recent publication. Industry leaders describe AI as enhancing efficiency and strategic insight. Yet, surveys of practitioners reveal uneven confidence in understanding AI systems and their implications. So this really reinforced the need for structured education surrounding the use of AI in comm fields. So this is where the intervention comes in. So the chatbot was actually created to function as a methodological coach. It was structured to guide students through the research process and also reinforce their critical thinking skills rather than generate answers. So I reframed AI not as a tool or a threat, but as a pedagogical partner. So this chatbot was built based on my course materials, and it was designed to support my teaching, not necessarily replace it. So it was embedded into my Moodle site to make it easy for students to access it. And it was built for my course materials that included my lectures, my notes, the syllabus, all of my assignments, and the rubrics, and also even notes on common mistakes that I had seen in previous years teaching the course and roadblocks that I knew students would actually run into. So now my initial setup of the bot sounds way more complex than it actually is. So our very own dean of the Love School of Business, Dean Haya Ajin, has also published an article in the Harvard Business Impact that gave step-by-step instructions on how to create a chatbot. It's really easy. So I personally even asked the chatbot to walk me through the steps of creating a chatbot. So I asked, not a chatbot, I asked ChatGPT to walk me through the steps of creating a custom chatbot. And then Mustafa was nice enough to share the HTML code with me to embed the page into my Moodle account. And I just basically tweaked it to fit my course. So that part was way more simple than it seems to be when people say that they design a chatbot. I have no programming experience and I was able to do it. So it's pretty easy. Now, in terms of the design, so it was important that I designed it to directly correspond to specific learning objectives that I had, and as well as the learning outcomes associated with a data-intensive course at Elon University. So this also ensured that when the students engaged with the chatbot, it was reinforcing some of those targeted learning outcomes. So the chatbot was programmed to guide students through progressively complex tasks, moving from foundational knowledge to actually higher order thinking in alignment with those course goals. I also made sure that the chatbot was intentionally prompting students and probing them to elaborate, justify, and refine their responses in order to support deeper engagement with some of the key concepts. And it was also important for me to have some embedded feedback mechanisms. So this included responses that provided corrective feedback, clarification, and examples to actually help students assess their understanding relative to the learning objectives. The chatbot was also supposed to always cite my lecture notes and things of that nature to make the connections for students so that they can better reinforce some of those concepts that we talk about in class. The chatbot modeled instructional behaviors to maintain alignment between activities and also the intended learning outcomes. Now, ethical guardrails were really essential with this because most of our concern as educators surrounding AI are some of the ethical concerns, okay? Academic dishonesty and things of that nature. So students could not use AI to generate drafts and they were required to disclose their use. So the bot was designed to not identify sources for students, but instead I trained the bot to walk students through the process of navigating the library database and even using search terms and those characteristics in the Google Scholar system, for instance. All right. So each assignment also had clear boundaries for acceptable and unacceptable AI use so that it was outlined. So again, I told you guys with the blanket policy that I had beforehand, students weren't necessarily disclosing. So now they had a policy for every assignment that I gave them. So they knew how they could use it, and how they could use it was based on how the industry was already using it and how they couldn't use it, because those unacceptable aspects were used to reinforce those learning objectives that I already had in place. So for exams, it was instructed not to give them answers, but to explain the material to them and clarify definitions, and also again making those connections using examples that they can actually understand. So one thing to note is that all of my major assignments in this class stayed the same. All right, those assignments were already pretty solid. I had already adjusted the assignment worksheets and the rubrics to accommodate Gen Z learners. And so I wanted to make sure that that stayed consistent so that when I did compare semesters, that it was an even comparison. So the only thing that was added to the class was the chatbot, and also in terms of assignments, the AI reflection assignments. So AI reflection assignments were basically what I used to actually help build the students' functional, critical, and rhetorical AI literacy skills. Okay. So this is an example of some of those assignments. These were low stakes. It was like 15 points, and it was associated with the revisions for each of the major assignments. So going back to my overall course design, the students had 3 major assignments leading up to their final, and they turned in their first submission. I fully graded, give them feedback, and we also have meetings regarding those submissions as well and the feedback that I gave. And then after our meetings, they have 7 days to revise and resubmit. Okay. So the reflections were assigned after students had already received my feedback and after we had already met together to discuss those things. So for the secondary research reflection, they were using AI to revise their drafts and also critiquing different tools. So I had them actually ask for assistance from 3 different chatbots, the course chatbot, and then 2 that they chose on their own. So it could have been Claude, it could have been, it's not Gamma, Gemini, okay, whichever one would have they chose or they like working with. All right. And then I had them compare those 3 different versions. Okay. So I wanted them to practice using AI as a collaborative tool. So what changed to improve what changed the clarity or tone of their assignment? What changes did the AI chatbots suggest that actually missed the mark altogether. Also, if there was anything that altered their intended meaning. So I really wanted them to think about how their own writing actually showed up through the comparisons to the other chatbots. All right. So for the focus group reflection, we were using it to revise their qualitative analysis. So through this, I wanted them to really focus on how they used AI and what worked. So I wanted to know how they used it through their revision process, what tool they used, what task did it help with, also how it actually how good or bad it worked based on the prompts that they actually used as well. So we were really looking at what commands were most effective or what prompts were most effective. Did the AI make assumptions or flatten the participants' voices from the focus groups, or did it even introduce inaccuracies? I already knew that it would, so that was really important as well. And also getting students to reflect on how they identified and corrected these issues as well. And then I wanted them to think about the ethical considerations that they needed to keep in mind when integrating AI into their qualitative revisions, and how did they bring their voices to the forefront of the conversation as well. For the survey reflection, this is where I was really focused on getting students to use StratGPT as an evaluator. So students still were concerned about getting an A, all right? They really wanted to know, what can I do to get an A? So I actually gave them the specific prompts going into their revision that also noted that I'm a difficult grader, so my spots say, all right? So I wanted them to put that in, and then I wanted them to get feedback on the strengths, weaknesses, and clarity of their submissions. And then I wanted them to give StratGPT a grade. So how would you grade StratGPT on the accuracy, depth, and usefulness of the suggestions that they gave? And also reflect on how well the AI actually understood the assignment's rigor and the expectations of the course. So in their reflection process, they really needed to understand what feedback they used and what they ignored. I didn't want them to just have blind trust in what the chatbot spit out. Also, how did framing it as me being a difficult grader or a strict grader actually influence the AI's response? And also what they learned about their own writing analysis and the use of AI as well. So moving forward to the evidence. So in this case, we're assessing the effectiveness of StratGPT. So although I, of course, value and I have a lot of fun with being innovative in my teaching, I'm also a junior faculty member. So I already know that it is super important for me to incorporate other measures of assessing my teaching effectiveness into the course, particularly in a course that is already considered rigorous by the students and that's already marking a shift or a transition in their learning based on the way they had probably been learning previously and what they are expected to, or how they're expected to learn once they get in my class. So I've always collected benchmark data from this class. So students are basically surveyed on their mastery of course learning objectives and also on their confidence and ability to complete research-related activities. So I do this benchmarking at the beginning, middle, and end of the class. The pre-assessment is actually what I use to put students into their groups. So they do a lot of the work in the groups in this class. So I wanted to make sure that we had a variety of skill sets in the groups and people were able to learn from each other as well. At the same time, I also decided to launch an IRB-approved research study because I realized that there were other individuals in COM who were also using chatbots in their class. And I thought that would give us a broader perspective in terms of what was the effectiveness and how was it helping students. So I have launched and collected data from my class and a couple classes taught by Michelle Lashley, one of my colleagues, about assessing the efficacy of chatbots in those courses, and we are working through that process of submitting that to a conference. So this data that I'm going to show you is just my course disaggregated from that. Now, the benchmarking data and the aggregate grade data across the semesters is going to help really understand the contextual changes in learning outcomes and student confidence before and after the intervention. So we have a lot of numbers here, but I'll do my best to explain it. So first, we really wanted to know, in terms of the study, how students were using different chatbots, and also how useful they saw the chatbot for a specific task. So these are just the results from my course. So students primarily use the chatbot for grammar review, brainstorming, and also clarifying and reviewing their assignments. So this suggests that the tool was valued more for writing support and than information gathering. So the students found the chatbot most useful for grammar review and clarifying assignments, and moderately useful for brainstorming and summarizing information. Now, they saw it as least useful in terms of identifying their literature sources and also drafting, which is good because remember that the chatbot was designed specifically to not do those things. All right. So instead, it was supposed to give them information on how to navigate the library database. I put this in place because it was one of the things that we really know about AI is that a lot of times it hallucinates sources, and sometimes it doesn't even pull out the good stuff from the sources. So I wanted to make sure students knew how to go through that process on their own instead of relying on the chatbot to do that. Additionally, we adapted a scale. It was a knowledge-based chatbot learning experience scale used to assess the extent to which the chatbot clearly communicated course expectations and conveyed essential information and supported students' construction of knowledge. So this scale really focused on teaching presence, which was the instructional design, and also cognitive presence, which was the knowledge development and understanding. So students reported positive perceptions of teaching and cognitive presence, particularly in clear communication of the facts for course-related activities, and also the helpfulness of the chatbot output in answering questions. So the composite score suggested that the chatbot provided consistent instructional support, though the clarity of instructions for participating in the course was slightly lower. So I also am just nosy. So I felt like some of the items that we have or that we had in the study or that already were existing were not enough. So I decided to create a 5-item measure for this study that would capture students' perceptions of the extent to which the custom course chatbot supported higher order thinking and also their cognitive engagement without replacing their independent work. So students reported a strong cognitive benefits, especially for help with their revisions and higher order thinking. So the composite score actually indicates that the chatbot effectively supported critical thinking, analysis, and also engagement as well. Now, of course, this is a small sample, but even in the larger sample where I looked across the different courses that were using chatbots, the chatbot was helpful in fostering critical thinking and enhancing that higher order learning when designed intentionally. So next, we wanted to look at the AI literacy and ethical trust. So this was basically assessing students' perceptions of their ability to use chatbots effectively and critically for learning tasks, and their confidence in the responsible and transparent use of AI chatbots for academic purposes. So students basically end up feeling like they had a solid and idea of the pros and cons of using a chatbot. So they reported high levels of AI literacy. They felt confident in writing prompts, evaluating the chatbot's responses, and also recognizing the need for fact checking, which indicates a strong critical awareness of using AI, because I did want them to be a lot more critical of it than they came into the class being. All right. Now, ethical perceptions were positive regarding transparency and responsible use. However, students did express some concern about fairness in grading. So this fairness in grading item really focused on if they thought using AI tools could make grading less fair because the professor wouldn't know who used AI and somebody would use it better, or spend less time on an assignment because they use AI, and a person who chose to not use AI at all would be spending more time doing it, but possibly could get a lower grade. So that was a concern for them. So it wasn't focused on the teacher using AI, it was focused on the students using AI and how that work will be graded in a way that is equitable and equal. So the composite score reflects an overall positive orientation toward AI as a tool for learning, alongside being cautious and more aware of its limitations, which is good. So focusing on the behavioral attitudes. So these items were used to assess their willingness to continue using chatbots in the future and also their genuine or general attitudes toward AI integration. So overall, students saw AI as valuable for their future careers and for feedback, but they didn't view it as a better means of learning than their instructors. Okay, so keep in mind they didn't think that the information that they received from the chatbot was clearer than that provided by their teachers, which in this case was me. They also didn't think that it was easier to interact with AI chatbots than teachers. So this is really important because, again, a lot of people have fear about AI replacing teaching or taking someone's job, and I've always said that it wouldn't, but now this kind of confirms it. So that's good to know. So now this table is getting into some of that benchmark data. So looking at the course outcomes before and after StratGPT. So what we found was that there was really parallel growth in research skill and confidence. So fall and spring semester. So spring was before I implemented the chatbot. So spring of 2025 and fall of 2025 was with the chatbot. And even on those research related activities and their ability to do them, those things were pretty consistent. So no matter where students started, they actually evened out in confidence by the end of the course. So the course successfully uplifted lower starting students, and even the high performers continued to grow, which showed that I was able to avoid those ceiling effects that are normally associated with that. So end of term competence was high across cohorts, and there was a strong indicator of instructional equity and also learning environment consistency. So overall, for those comparisons, despite baseline differences, both semesters actually achieved nearly identical end of term performance on research abilities. Basically, it supports the fact that strong course design works. All right. The chatbot didn't accelerate any of the learning outcomes. It actually shaped the experience and provided continuous support and clarity, but they both met at the same endpoint. All right. So this was also supported by the distribution of grades for both semesters. So even though I noticed that the first drafts were better, okay, so even the revision process stayed the same. So they always submitted, had a meeting with me, discussed their feedback, and then had 7 days to submit their revisions. The first drafts were just better with the support of the chatbot. However, when they submitted those final drafts, those grades were pretty consistent with the previous semesters as well. So looking forward to my reflection and what changed and what didn't in my courses. So the biggest takeaway or the biggest shift wasn't just about the efficiency. All right. So I did have a huge reduction in repetitive questions, and I no longer had to repeatedly answer questions that were already addressed in lectures, assignment instructions, and other places or in Moodle. The chatbot basically handled that for me, which was great because it freed me up to actually focus on deeper conceptual engagement. All right. So I had more time to have those deep conversations with students. And this was another shift that I saw in my students' learning. So they came to office hours with better questions, more curiosity, and also less fixation on grades, or so I thought. Okay, we'll talk about it. So in a lot of ways, it changed the energy of the classroom. So if you're like me and you just get a kick out of seeing the wheels turning, that is that was probably the best part about implementing this chatbot. Just seeing my students really go through that process and understand that the learning doesn't stop with me, it doesn't stop with the technology. They can keep going, they can be curious. They were embracing their curiosity, embracing the unknown, and that's what really became fun for me. Okay, so it brought my spark back for learning because we weren't just focused on how do I get an A. Now, they still wanted to know how to get an A. Okay, that was still important for them, but it didn't show up as much in office hours. And those office hours conversations became a lot more productive and focused, and not just focused on logistics. So one of the biggest lessons I also learned was that it's not a passive tool. So it actually became one of the most demanding parts of the course. It required constant collaboration or calibration and oversight. All right. So for the most part, I was working with the chatbot before class, after class, at night, all the time. All right. So um, And it required my students to also understand some of the limitations of the bot as well. So students initially over trusted AI. They just automatically thought that everything that it gave them was great and it was perfect and it was right. That was not the case. So, in order to combat that, I really had to model and create and foster a culture of transparency over surveillance. So, help them develop a more critical stance by even talking about my own experiences. So, sometimes I would do things in the chatbot just to figure out where it was. So, even if I decided to have the chatbot assess an assignment based on the rubric, I would then show the students, look at all these things. I would show them the conversation that I had with the chatbot. I would show them the things that the chatbot missed, that even though it was clearly in the rubric, it still somehow gave points for having a title page, for instance, even though there was no title page present, right? So understanding that and modeling that for students helped create an environment where students were able to come to me and say, like, okay, the chatbot told me this. And then those were notes that I could take back in terms of configuring and calibrating the chatbot and change things up accordingly based on that. It really helped extend my teaching presence beyond the classroom. I always tell students, although the internet is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, unfortunately, I am not. So I tell them, you can't email me on Saturday night questions about an assignment that is due Sunday night or Sunday morning. Okay. So you really have to build in that feedback into your schedule and your time management so that you know when you might be able to get a response in a timely fashion that will support that submission. And sometimes the weekend isn't that. So the chatbot was really helpful in extending their teaching presence in terms of answering some of those logistical questions that students may have about an assignment. Because of course I'd already gone over the assignment in class and it had access to the assignments and the rubric and the syllabus as well. All right. So more importantly, my authority as an instructor didn't change at all. It never shifted. If anything, it actually became a lot more defined through having these policies and guardrails and through working with students as well. So the key insight here is that the chatbot did not reduce teaching at all. It just redistributed it. Okay. So it supported steady growth and encouraged independent learning, but it doesn't reduce or replace your teaching at all. All right. So AI actually complemented existing pedagogical strengths that I already had. So this included scaffolding, transparent expectations, revision opportunities, and feedback rich instruction. Remember, I was doing that in the spring before I implemented the chatbot. All right. So that didn't change at all. So another thing that I noted as I was working with this is that it can't replace your grading. I know grading is probably the worst part of our job, but it doesn't replace it. So it lacked the nuance and disciplinary judgment necessary for meaningful and reliable assessment. All right. So as I said in the example that I gave from the last slide, even there were times where there would be things that were clearly outlined in the rubric and the chatbot would give points for it. What I noticed the most is that the chatbot loves participation trophies. Everybody gets an A, all right? And so understanding how the feedback that you give students is so important, okay? And it's important that we actually take the time to do that because a chatbot cannot replace that in a way that the students actually feel is valuable in the way that I've seen is valuable as well. So we do need to pay attention to that. Finally, the chatbot wasn't essential. Okay. So keep in mind, the chatbot didn't accelerate our learning outcomes at all. Okay. It shaped the experience, it provided continuous support and clarity, but the end was the same. All right. So the students who didn't have access to the chatbot had the same level of competence at the end of the semester as the students who did have access to the chatbot. So one of the biggest improvements I noticed was with the AI literacy development. All right. So this is just to say that it's not a necessary tool to have in every class. It should be intentional, it should be goal aligned, and it also should be context dependent. So there are some cases where learning outcomes may be better achieved without AI support. So some of those AI free courses are going to be so necessary in our teaching and learning it in our curriculums. However, there are some cases where it actually does help in terms of fostering students' development in AI literacy. So for my conclusions and final thoughts, all right, so I really want you guys to understand that implementing AI in this manner is closer to teaching an additional section of your course rather than simply adopting a new technology. So what worked best for this chatbot to be a well-oiled machine was continuous collaboration, all right? So it can't just be designated to one person and that person handles everybody's chatbot. That would not work, all right? So it required ongoing attention to remain aligned with the course goals and even remain aligned with where my students were. So again, as I started to note some of those common mistakes that I was seeing, I had to go back to the chatbot and explain some of those common mistakes. Even when it came down to lectures and feedback, I had to ask the chatbot, okay, what questions do you think students might have? Do you have any questions? What are some things that you don't understand or that you want me to provide clarity on? This was a regular thing, okay? We also need to understand that sustainability depends heavily on having institutional support, particularly having access to the enterprise level tools. All right. So the enterprise tool doesn't use the data to train its model. So this made me a lot more comfortable with putting my intellectual property into the bot because I knew it wasn't going to go out into space and train the larger OpenAI system. All right. So without that, the burden on faculty would be too difficult to maintain. And I personally probably wouldn't feel comfortable using it in that way without having it. So I had the premium subscription through the AI Pedagogy Challenge, and that's how I ended up with that enterprise subscription through Elon. And that has been a game changer for me. It's been great. All right. We also need to be thinking about equity issues as well. So equity and accessibility should be considered for students and for faculty. So in terms of the student side, I wanted to make sure that I was offsetting the cost of having that system. So I replaced the textbook with the premium subscription in terms of required course materials. This was important for me because the textbook already, for one, was not sufficient. So our industry changes so much that I was already supplementing the textbook with a lot of the materials that were available open online through web articles and scholarly articles as well. And also, honestly, my students had already told me that they were not reading the textbook. So there was no use in them paying $80 for the textbook that I already had to supplement and that they already weren't reading. And instead, I decided to offset that cost with requiring them to get the Chat GPT Plus subscription. Also, when it comes to the faculty equity, like I said, I had access through the Pedagogy Challenge, and that was great for me. I I think we need to be mindful about expecting faculty to pay for their own premium subscriptions to implement this in their course, especially considering I just told you guys that it's not necessary. All right. So as long as you have strong course design, the learning outcomes have the same end. And also, it was really time consuming. Okay. So, again, it's like developing a new course, and there are I didn't have access to any course development funds or resources to take the time out to do this. So, that's something that we need to be mindful of as well as we move forward. So, that actually ends what I came to present on. So, now we're going to open the floor up for any questions, comments, or even discussion. Let me stop sharing.
Thank you, Dr. Pendleton. If you have any questions, you can unmute yourself and ask your questions. Your mics have been enabled, or you can also drop your questions in the chat or the Q&A section, and I can read it. Thank you for your participation. Any questions for Dr. Pendleton?
I would like to add a comment. It is a very brave move to drop your textbook and go with the Chat GPT subscription. How was the students' reaction? What did they feel? And did you receive any pushback and pullback, or how is it working out so far?
I didn't receive any pushback on dropping the textbook, actually. Some of the students were already required to have a ChatGPT Plus subscription in their other courses. So they were fine. So it kind of evened out the cost for them. And like I said beforehand, the students had already admitted. So as an icebreaker, I did a we listen, we don't judge for student introductions. They had already told me they weren't reading the textbooks anyway. So that helped a lot. I mean, again, as the industry changes so fast, the textbooks aren't keeping for this course. The one for this course wasn't keeping up anyway. So it was easier for me to make that shift because I knew students weren't necessarily reading that text. And I knew sometimes the text was not sufficient in answering those questions for the students. So I didn't receive any pushback on that. Now, students were also able to still use the chatbot too, though. They just had the same limitations that they would in terms of the number of queries, I believe. Thank you for that.
So I have one. So in terms of the skill sets, right? You mentioned that what was the baseline level in terms of skill sets that they needed to participate in your class in terms of AI usage, and did that improve? What was the reaction right like? What was the feedback like? Did they find that helpful? I know that you mentioned a couple of data points, but the overall feedback and proficiency and skill part of it.
Mhm. So overall, when it comes to the baseline, this class has no prerequisites. So students were coming in at a variety of levels. Like some students came in who were not able to do any of the research related activities or had never done those activities before joining us. Some of them had stats in high school, but not really a lot there as well. In terms of AI proficiency, I did not assess for AI proficiency in their benchmark assessments. So I can't necessarily say how they came in that regard. Now, when it came to how they took the use of AI afterwards, they actually enjoyed it. They did not feel like it gave them a leg up, so to speak, or that it replaced their learning, but they did say that they felt like the quality of their assignments actually improved. And that's something that I noted as well in terms of the quality of assignments for the first submissions. Those improved because they did have access to that support in order to ensure that at least they had the components that they absolutely needed in the class. And so that was a positive for that experience. Now, there were some cases, I don't think students like the reflections very well. All right. So when I talk about like the course and grades, so I was one of those people I thought like, oh, I'm loving this. I'm loving my office hours. My office hours were still busy. We're having all of these meaningful conversations. The students are curious and they're having fun learning. And so I'm a nerd. So that was really like blessing my heart. And when we got toward the end, rookie mistake, I know. So for my spots, I decided, okay, I'm not going to release their revisions yet because I don't want them to only complete the spots based on what their grade is. Oh, I got an A, so I love her so much. No, and I thought they were feeling it. So I thought like we're in this together. We're having fun together. Rookie mistake. Okay, I should have definitely went ahead and released their revision scores because a lot of them were like, um, really upset about grades, really and I did receive a comment about AI. I didn't pay for AI to teach me. And so I actually wrote about that experience in my unit one because that was one thing that broke my heart because I'm like, all this work out AI can't teach you. So that was one of clearly AI is not able to teach you and provide that quality instruction, which is one of the things that I noted in this presentation as well. It was a lot of work on my part and AI did none of it. Like I said, it handled the logistical things. It served more like a TA for the class. Like if you had questions on an assignment or something like that, if you needed a tutor for the exam and you wanted to talk about some of the concepts that you possibly didn't understand in class, or even proofread somebody else's assignment. Okay, so it was good for that, but AI did not teach you. And so the students were, well, I did have a comment about that I was like, oh, no, that's not what happened. So yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Dr. Pendleton? Okay.
We have a quiet group.
Yeah, we have a quiet group this time. Okay. Thank you again so much for your time and your participation. This is our last EI Research and Network series for this semester. However, we are going to pick it back up in the fall. We have exciting lineup coming up. We have Lee Rainey from Imagining the Digital Future. We also have Alex Tragut coming in, and a couple of others who will be joining us for the AI Research and Network series. Again, you know where to find us. As a reminder, Dr. Pendleton's slides, along with the recording as well as post surveys, will be sent out at the end of today. Thank you again so much, and hope to see you in the next one. Have a
Thank
great
you.
day. Thank you.
Thank you all. All right.